future belongs to the Mavericks, the misfits, the rebels, those crazy ones that were immortalized in Apple's iconic Think Different campaign. How do I know this? Well, all change, by definition, is against the rules, right? Creativity is fundamentally subversive in nature. And inventing the new is a fundamentally defiant act in a world that's characterized by obedience, obedience to our conventional wisdom and our company rules and traditions and our industry orthodoxies. Yet in this creative and disruptive world you've been hearing about for the last couple of days and you live in and work in, it's the irregular people who generate the irregular ideas and produce the irregular successes. So I'm not talking about, rattling the cages and being a rebel without a cause, but really about what does it take to be the author of the future rather than a victim of the future? And that starts with developing a really robust answer to this question. Are you capable of changing as fast as change itself? In a world that's ruled by relentless and multifaceted and occasionally shocking change, are you constitutionally adaptable? So let me break that down for you. Are you capturing more than your fair share of opportunity in your credit union? Do you frequently surprise your members and your competitors? I mean, like really knock their socks off. And are you attracting more than your fair share of the most talented people out there? In other words, are you able to regularly reinvent yourselves without walking through the valley of the shadow of death? That's the question. Can anyone tell me what these 4 companies have in common? Just shout it out if you have an idea. Okay, we're getting there, sort of halfway there. These were the leading tech companies for decades until the early 2000s, when each and every one of them missed one of the most fundamental shifts in technology in our lifetime, the emergence of mobile. And this isn't just a technology industry phenomenon. In industry after industry, it's the insurgents that create new value and new markets. And while the incumbents have all the money, all the headcount, all the customer relationships, the R&D budgets, the patents, they tend to not have the ability to proactively reinvent themselves. And look, there's a reason for this. The modern organization, the kind of organizations we all work and live in every day, they weren't designed for adaptability. They were invented over 150 years ago to solve for very different challenges, to maximize standardization, specialization, predictability, control. And the design question behind this organization was, how do we turn flesh and blood, free-thinking human beings into widget-producing robots? And all of the practices and systems we take for granted today, whether it's budgeting or performance review or ROI calculations, those were all invented to routinize the non-routine, human beings being the most non-routine thing of all, and to help organizations work efficiently at scale. Look, this is called bureaucracy, and it's generated untold wealth and progress, to be sure. But today, efficiency is just table stakes. And we live in a world where the challenge is for every organization, for all of your credit unions, to become ever more adaptable, ever more innovative, and ever more inspiring. And in that world, the design questions are very different. The questions on your mind as leaders should be things like, how do I amplify human capability, originality, audacity, zeal? How do we multiply the impact of human accomplishment? And how do we mobilize and organize contribution in ever more powerful ways? Now, you may be wondering, why would I ask these kinds of questions? Well, this is where all of the leverage is in a creative economy. And here's the thing. The nature of most organizations is they put limits on human capability. There is probably no organization on earth that is as resilient, as passionate, and as creative as the human beings who work inside of it. And yet, organizations are how we get things done, how we make an impact, how we do things together. We could never do ourselves. So the question at the heart of the leadership agenda today is, how do we get all of the advantages of organizations, coordination, efficiency, discipline, the leverage to do complex things, without all the limits they tend to impose on human beings? That's the sort of gnarly, knotty question, the fundamental, how do you transcend that fundamental trade-off that I want to spend time unpacking with you today by exploring 5 Maverick strategies for how you make yourself and your credit union ever more resilient, ever more inventive, and ever more inspiring and engaging. So let's dive right in. First Maverick strategy. It's very clear that the era of the heroic, all-knowing, all-powerful leader, it's over. 20 years ago when we were starting Fast Company, I was a precocious 12-year-old, I think, at that point. We called that character white man facing right. You've seen this guy on the cover of business magazines. Well, I know, it's funny. We banned him in favor of something quite different. And the point is, the face of leadership has changed dramatically. But equally important, the work of leadership is undergoing radical revision. And as a leader today, you have to assume walking in that you've got no power. You're not in charge of anything. You can't sanction anyone who's unwilling to do your bidding. Now, those of you with teenagers at home, I think you've already gotten that memo. But if you take that as your starting point and you're able to inspire and mobilize people to do great things together, well, then you're a leader. We've reached this kind of inflection point when it comes to how do we mobilize and organize people. And increasingly, the most exciting and vibrant and innovative organizations, they're governed by a wholly new set of principles. They're places where coordination happens without centralization, where all ideas compete on equal footing, where power comes from sharing, not from hoarding, where the wisdom of the many trumps the authority of the few, and where novel viewpoints, they don't get squashed, they get amplified, and mediocrity has no place to hide, and importantly, intrinsic rewards are what move people most of all. These principles are on the march. They are embedded in the next generation of your leaders and your members. We can't avoid them in this world today. And here's the thing. For too long, the ruling ideology of too many organizations has been control. Controlling people, controlling information, controlling deviations from the norm. And that's exactly the wrong design for unleashing the full imagination and initiative and passion of people. But what's the right design? Well, I think these principles begin to tell the story. Meritocracy, transparency, community, and above all, freedom. Now, I'm not talking about swinging the pendulum from control to chaos, but again, how do you transcend that tricky trade-off between control and freedom that's at the heart of any human endeavor, any human enterprise? We've all experienced, everyone here has experienced such an expansion in your personal freedom. We can all choose to connect with anyone, anywhere in the world at any point in time. We can contribute and create and get our ideas and our productions out there based on our passion, not on some job description. We can challenge, we can speak out, we can meet up, we can rise up. We can do all these things. But I'm always just so amazed when I think about the responsible grown-up adults who get hired by organizations, and on the weekend, they can go out and buy a new car or sign a mortgage, and then they come back to work on Monday morning, and they don't have authorization to get a new desk chair. It's ridiculous. But these kinds of controls, they're everywhere. You know this. They're everywhere in organizational life. And just look at the recent freak out over BYOD, bring your own device to work. I don't know how you all have resolved it in your credit unions, but after a lot of hand-wringing, for the most part, except from, I think, a lot of accounting and law firms, it's turned out you can actually bring your own device to work. But I want to argue this is just baby steps. We're headed to a world of DYOJ, design your own job. PYOC, pick your own colleagues. Here's one that puts fear into the heart of controllers everywhere. AYOE, approve your own expenses. CYOB, choose your own. I could play this game all day. I could. And the fact is, there are experiments like this going on in the world to inject more freedom and openness and transparency and community into management practices and systems in every kind of organization out there. And just to give you a little taste, I want to take you on a quick tour of some of the vanguard organizations that I've studied over the last decade. These are organizations that are swapping out their kind of industrial DNA for a new set of, call them post-bureaucratic, call them 21st century, call them awesome, what you will, practices and principles. Take W.L. Gore. We all know their Gore-Tex fabric. They produce thousands of products. They're one of the best places to work, one of the most innovative companies in the world. They've scrapped every vestige of hierarchy. There is no org chart, no job titles, no defined job roles. All there is complete freedom for associates to work on whatever they want with whomever they want, and total accountability to their peers who, among other things, can figure out and designate your compensation. So it's rich with accountability and autonomy at the same time. HCL is a giant Indian IT company. They are right now running a portfolio of experiments around this question of how can we invert the pyramid? How do we make managers accountable to customer-facing people, not the other way around? One of them is this brutal 360-degree review process whereby any individual can review a manager that impacts their work, post it publicly and anonymously for the whole world to see. Talk about no place for mediocrity to hide. And all kinds of experiments like that are going on there. Cemex is a $15 billion global cement and building products company based in Mexico. They have created a vibrant culture of cross-boundary collaboration, which is supported by this state-of-the-art social network they launched. And it was designed to involve just about everyone in this vast organization to play a meaningful role when it comes to setting strategic priorities or leading improvement projects or devising and launching entirely new products. Statoil, a heavily regulated oil and gas company, $130 billion based out of Norway, they tossed the budget. Wouldn't you like to do that? That annual kabuki theater we all dread, they scrapped it. And instead, they reimagined it as this dynamic, continuous, participative process that has unleashed unwittingly all of this initiative and ingenuity across the organization. Or let's take a bank. Svenska Handelsbanken, they have about 850 branches, mostly in Northern Europe and the UK. They are a conventional full-service bank in name only. For the last 44 years, their return on equity has beat every one of their peers by a significant margin. Since the teeth of the financial crisis, they've logged 167% total return, while all their peers, significant negative returns. I think you know the drill. This exceptional performance, you can track back to a radically decentralized organization and a near obsessive focus on the customer above all else. So Handelsbanken has 12,000 people in 25 countries, but they only have 3 layers of management. Operating decisions are 100% decentralized. So the branches make their own loan decisions. They make their own decisions about pricing on loans and deposits. They control their marketing budget. They control their local website. And they serve every customer segment in their catchment area. Now, I don't need to tell you that these practices go against conventional banking wisdom, right? But what they allow Handelsbanken branches to do is they let each branch effectively be the bank for the customer and to make decisions based on these local, deep, and authentic relationships. So each of these organizations, what they've done is by transcending those trade-offs I keep talking about between size and agility, between discipline and creativity, between efficiency and engagement, they've effectively built themselves an innovation and an ingenuity advantage. And the core takeaway here for all of you is that as important as it is to focus on inventing the future of business and all the shifts and changes in technology that's coming down the pike, it's equally urgent for you to actively reimagine your organization and your role in it as leaders in a world that's governed by completely new principles. Which brings me to my next Maverick strategy. We've got to change the way we change. If the idea of retooling your organization to make it fundamentally more adaptive and innovative makes you think, oh gosh, we got to design, a massive, meticulously designed, top-down change program, we're going to be in trouble. Because here's the thing with change programs. They all have one thing in common. Can anyone guess what it is? Yell. I can't hear. This isn't a well-kept secret. Most of them fail. You've probably been through some kind of re-engineering or strategy redirect. Most of them tend to fail. And we've been studying the challenge of big change at the Management Lab, which is my little initiative that I run with a few people. And what we found are 3 widely held beliefs about change that are particularly toxic. Let's just go through them. Change starts at the top. The notion that top executives, senior leaders are the ones who initiate change. They're the ones who are best placed to judge when change should happen. Well, the problem here is most senior leaders are insulated by layers of managers, and when change becomes big enough and unavoidable enough to capture the scarce attention of senior leadership, you're already playing defense. You know that expression, burning platform, that you hear CEOs say sometimes? Well, if you're already standing on it, you're already toast. We got to change that. Change is cascaded. Doesn't that sound lovely? Well, what it means is that change is rolled out, it is scripted, it is imposed upon people. And when you overly prescribe both the ends and the means, people are not going to embrace change. This notion that change can be engineered, like a large-scale construction project. Here's the problem with this. Well, the scope and the nature of change, it's bounded by the imagination of the engineer. And often it's way too limited or it's way too grandiose. So the question is, if you do want to make deep change that's sustainable and avoid these pitfalls, what do? Well, let me offer up a few approaches to building a robust change platform rather than a change program that kind of gets around these pitfalls. So move from being a top-down change architect to being an activist-out change enabler. If you want change to be proactive and pervasive, you have to syndicate out the responsibility for initiating change to everyone in the organization. So take, for example, a small band of trainee doctors, young leaders, and change specialists at the National Health Service in the United Kingdom, enormous organization. Several years ago, they initiated something they called Change Day in 2013. And they scrounged resources and budget, they borrowed what they could, they begged, they leveraged social media, and they sparked a grassroots social movement in the NHS where they got 189,000 people to pledge one concrete action to improve patient outcomes. The next year, those pledges and those actions ballooned to 800,000 people involved. Today, Change Day is a platform for system-wide change efforts where they've done everything from reimagine radically maternal care to solve a decades-old sticky problem of getting the right wheelchair to the right person at the right time. And so they've effectively enabled and invited everyone at the NHS, this is the 5th largest employer in the world, huge organization, to be a change leader. And in the process, they've improved care for tens of thousands of people. From sold to invited, right? So if you want people to be genuinely committed to change from the get-go, you have to, bid out the how. You can't just look for buy-in after something's fully baked. And this is very much actually like what you heard announced the other day, the credit union innovation program that was just announced with Open IDEO. How do you bid out the how of change or innovation to a wide group of people? We've worked, again, at the Management Lab with many large organizations around launching what we call hackathons around tackling big system-wide, just really thorny problems by inviting hundreds, thousands, even 10,000s of people across organizations to get involved. And one quick example is Adidas North America, the sports apparel company, has been on a multi-year journey actually now to create a culture where innovation is both intrinsic, embedded in the DNA of everything they do, and also instinctive, where every person is equipped and energized and inspired to innovate. And they could have, to do this, they could have appointed an innovation czar or a steering committee, but instead, they launched a hackathon and invited thousands of people across the organization from every level and every function to take part. And this is a little picture of the platform we created. I can't show you much more, but it's a collaborative platform that's designed to get, on the one hand, everybody really smart about the problem, not just to sort of throw ideas out there, and then to enable deep collaboration to generate thousands of options when it comes to how do we hack our organization to make it fundamentally innovation friendly. The result has been a portfolio of shovel-ready, risk-bounded experiments that they're testing and they're learning from and they're iterating on, and some they're going to discard and some they're going to scale. Third option here, moving from managed change to something that's more organic. So Kurt Lewin, a psychologist, has this famous model of change. It's called unfreeze, change, freeze. And that model is kind of engraved in the mind of most leaders who think of change as sort of like this episodic interruption of the status quo. But in a world that's changing all the time, what we need is something more like permanent slush. And that's exactly what Cemex, the company I just introduced you to a moment ago, has. They have some 500 self-defined, self-governed communities. This could be a global group of electricians or a cross-boundary group of people who are working on bottom-of-the-pyramid solutions for buildings and financing. And they work together to generate and implement change initiatives, thousands of them, a year. And these organic communities that cross every kind of boundary, functional, hierarchical, geographical, they can do things that the formal organization has never been able to do, like supercharge their sustainability agenda, create the first global product in a highly localized industry. So it's often said, people don't like change, right? You've heard that before. We don't like change. Well, if that were true, would we move across the country, get married, have kids, pick up a new hobby if we didn't like change? I think it's not that we don't like change. We just don't like royal edicts. We don't want our change to be rolled out to us. We want to help roll it up. Oh, here's a picture of Shift's the platform. Let me move on to the third Maverick strategy. So we live in a world that increasingly recognizes that each of us has so much inside of us, that recognizes that we are all producers, inventors, even artists, dare I say, and that the work of art, that brave and scary work of doing something original, something that has risk to it, something that might change somebody's life for the better, is the most important work of all. And I'm not just talking about people who are professional artists. Creativity is a fundamentally human capability. We are all born with some kind of creative genius, whether it's storytelling or singing or making things or taking things apart, whatever it is. The problem is, once we get processed through our schools and institutions, rather than growing into our creativity, we tend to grow out of it. Buckminster Fuller put this so beautifully, I think. Most of us are born geniuses, we just get de-geniused very rapidly. So the question is, how do we re-genius ourselves? And just as important, in the words of Pixar Animation Studios, which is one of the most stunningly successful cultures of innovation I've ever encountered in my many years of looking at this, they say, how do you do art as a team sport? What a beautiful question. That's the singular question behind Pixar's singular design for creating consistently spectacular work. So I probably don't need to introduce Pixar. Anybody here who's a parent or a grandparent or even goes to the movies, you know them. They've reinvented the art of animation and the science and the technology of animation. They're a creative juggernaut of the first order. 15 feature films, 15 #1 box office hits. They've won scores of Oscars for their technical and their artistic achievement, billions of dollars at the box office. I mean, their performance is nothing short of astonishing. But Pixar is just as driven when it comes to creating an environment and systems for work that produce maximum creativity, collaboration, and productive learning as they are freaked out about the art of their film. And it all comes back to that question: how do you do art as a team sport? And let me set the stage for you. So when you go to visit Pixar's headquarters, they're in Emeryville in the Bay Area. They're not in LA. You drive for what seems like miles by this imposing brick and iron fence, and you finally come to the gatehouse, and you give the security guard all your credentials, and you wait for a little while. And then you finally get your badge back, and you look down on it, and it says, "A stranger from the outside." And a little switch is flipped in your head, and you get a sense of what it must feel like to walk across that transom into that magic factory every single day. And it is a true palace to the people. 22-acre campus. It's an old Dole factory that they renovated. Swimming pools, rose gardens, amphitheaters, just incredible amenities. And the heart and soul of it is this soaring atrium, which you can see up here, which I think contains all of the condensed energy of everyone who works at Pixar. People are skating and rollerblading and biking and meeting and eating and playing, all right there in the center and the heart of the campus. And as you spend a little time inside Pixar, and it doesn't just have to be at headquarters, it can just be inside any part of their organization, you start to get this robust sense of their answer to that question: how do you do art as a team sport? And it's really pretty simple. Put everybody on the same team. And at Pixar, what you hear over and over again is this mantra: everyone a filmmaker, everyone a filmmaker, filmmaker-based decision-making. And why do they say that? They really mean it. They don't just mean the designers and the producers and the directors and the animators. They mean the techies, they mean the accountants, they mean the production assistants. They expect you to make filmmaker-based decisions. Because why? Your paycheck says Pixar Animation Studios. And if you're not making filmmaker-based decisions, what are you doing there? Now, they're very understanding about the fact that not everybody arrives a full-fledged filmmaker or a confident artist. So they create all kinds of practices and systems for helping people build their capacity as artists, as filmmakers, and importantly, as Pixar team members. And I just want to share a couple with you. And the first is they have made the entire place a canvas for their art, which of course is the art of storytelling. So wherever you go, every surface, every square inch is plastered with story, from an interactive approach to learning about the art of storyboarding, to exhibits of the art from the current film, to galleries of art of Pixarians' own art that they produce. Probably the most amazing example of sort of art overflowing in the place itself is something called the animator's pit. So the animators are kind of the exalted folks inside an organization like Pixar. They were offered the swanky offices on the outside, sun-filled, enclosed offices in the building when they renovated the new building. And they all said, no, we need to all be together in one big scrum. So the facilities people said, okay, you're on your own, you figure it out. And they adopted the center, the bowels, the cave of the building. It's called the animator's pit. And what they did was, those garden sheds at Home Depot that you can go out and buy? They went out and they each sort of got one, and then they tricked them out like you would not believe. This one's boring. They made Lego castles, tiki huts, entire Wild West villages. I mean, the place is outrageous. You get lost in it. This is my favorite one. This is like a Downton Abbey-esque sort of English countryside library. You push the bust of Beethoven, this door swings open, you walk into this mod 70s Vegas lounge, they give you a smoking jacket and a Pim's cup. I am not kidding. It's just crazy. But the point is that this is about the art of storytelling being shared and expressed in any way, people feel it at any one point in time. And you see it, you soak it up in outrageous ways and then in smaller ways everywhere around Pixar. But it's not just about the place. I always say Pixar is sort of like the extreme home makeover version of the workplace, right? Don't try this at home. But their practices, I think, are instructive and transferable. Two, I think, in particular. So Making a Pixar film is like a 4 to 5 year sprint. They just never stop. It's incredibly intense. But what they do at the end is they hold what they call a post-mortem. Think of like a science fair meets a film festival, and there are sessions and exhibits, and everyone in the organization pauses to learn about, insights and lessons and mistakes and new technology. It's kind of a forced reflection whereby they absorb and make sense of everything they learned and institutionalize it and spread it around. They have a practice that's more familiar to anybody who's worked in the world of film, which is they screen the dailies, a section of the film that they're working on every day. But what's different is at Pixar, anyone can come to those sessions, and everyone is expected to offer up specific and meticulous critique, and they do. Every second of every film is prosecuted mercilessly by your peers. They have an expression for the feeling that they get from this experience. That should be a bumper sticker, right? It's a good one.